Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and moderator, and I'm also the creator and the publisher of thechocolatelife.com. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the largest food trade shows in the Americas, and it's called the Fancy Food Show, specifically the Summer Fancy Food Show in New York City. I'm here in Arizona. I didn't have an opportunity to get to New York for it this year, but Chocolate Life contributor Keith Ayub was able to go to the show, and we're going to be talking about the Fancy Food Show and chocolate. Before I bring Keith onto stage, what I'd like to remind everybody is, no matter where you're watching, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, go into the live chat, go into the comments, let me know where in the world you're connecting from. We'll get that shouted up on screen. And if you have a question for Keith or for me at any point during the hour, get that question into the comments and we will address them. And without further ado, hey, Keith, how are you this morning?
Doing fine. Great.
I suppose it's morning here in Arizona. It's early afternoon where you are.
It is. Yeah. It's like, yeah. So, right. So that's all. It's all good. Yeah. Right.
And I can tell everybody that while we're going to get up into the mid 90s in here in Arizona today, we got a humidity of around 30%. And, Keith, you're probably also about the maybe upper 80s, mid 90s today, but you have a much higher humidity. So it seems a lot warmer where you are.
So it's as hot as it is. A lot of people want to stay inside, AC, all that kind of thing.
Listen, I understand completely, having endured like 40 New York summers. So Keith, the Summer Fancy Food Show, Javits, New York City, Specialty Foods Association. I know you and I met in 2022. We were at an Italian dinner.
Right.
And so I know that you have a history of going to the Fancy Food Show. And so the first thing I want to talk with you about before we get to specific brands that you want to talk about, maybe you have something that you want to do a live tasting of, is, the Fancy Food Show this year had about 2,500 exhibitors. It exists in at least, I think, 3 floors of the Javits Center. And there may be also another side pavilion. So it's an enormous show. So, with your background, and I am assuming you also go to medical conferences and other things like that where there are trade shows, how do you approach, going through? Have you developed a methodology of making sure that you go and visit everything you want to visit over the course of the time that you're there?
Well, for a show that's, I think, this large. I mean, other trade shows for food, or you had mentioned, we were talking earlier that this one is fairly small. This one to me was overwhelming. I mean, when you talk about 2,500 exhibitors, it's like, and it's all about food. Usually when I go to nutrition conferences, there's food, there's medical, there's publishing, there is equipment for food service, people who do a lot of food service. So there's a lot that you can exclude if it's not your wheelhouse. This was all about food, and it was all about specialty food. And I should say, I just finished a post on encouraging people all the reasons to eat summer fruit, because most people aren't getting enough fruit in general, and summer is like the perfect time to be eating a lot more fruit. I'm eating a ton of it, and ways to make it more economical. The Fancy Food Show is not economical. Okay, it's all about fancy food. It is not the economical food show. So that said, you just have to kind of go in there with, this is expensive stuff, period. And part of me is still saying, like, I can't believe there's so much expensive food marketed out there. I mean, and a lot of it's really good. I went in there with, what was my strategy? Well, first of all, you're not going to be able to taste everything. So just be selective. What do I want to select? I was very interested in both the U.S. production of things, also, but also particularly with respect to dairy foods and cheeses and craft cheeses and things like that, and I do like to support local dairy farmers, et cetera, but I also wanted to look at the cocoa products and what's going on there, and there is a confectionery section of the, but it didn't include all of the craft chocolate, for example, because some of the craft chocolatiers were housed in their country of origin, and that aisle or that wing that was focused on particular countries. So Ecuador was, for example, one of those situations where they weren't, they had a lot of chocolatiers that were focused on really just Ecuadorian chocolate. So they were in the Ecuador section. They weren't in the the chocolate and confectionery section. So so on one hand, I wanted to focus, but even with a focus, I found myself running all around the place. Say, okay, I did my homework a little ahead of time and looked at both the with the app that they have.
I downloaded the app.
I downloaded the app, and like say, did my little search for chocolate, and that narrowed it down somewhat. But it included a lot of other things too. So I did my homework and looked at where I was going to go, and I looked at where the booths were, and I thought, oh boy, it could be in the 500 aisle, it could be in the 2700 aisle, and they're separated by floors. So you need to have some kind of an idea. And when you're going between floors, of course, you go up and down the aisles and you pass things that you want to try. At some point, you go, okay, I had no idea you can have this many cookies. It's like it's like flavors that you wouldn't even know existed, and what they could do with it. And to some extent, most of these, a lot of these people are looking for distribution. So these are products that are not out there yet.
Right. So let me ask the question slightly differently. So as you're walking through, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my own methodology that I've developed over the course of many years. This was when I was working in high technology before I even got into food and specialty chocolate. Is that you're a pediatric nutritionist by training. So as you were wandering the show, what was your impression about nutrition and dietary trends and food claims that people are making?
Well, interesting,
because I imagine it's really interesting to get distracted, or it's really hard not to get distracted by those kinds of things as you're in the search for chocolate.
And not just when you're in my line of work, just my colleagues and I all joke about this. You can't look at any food without thinking, okay, potassium, vitamin C, fiber, which okay, fine. You just sort of block it out. But it's the way it is. So two things came to mind. One of them was that I've worked for many years with a low-income population, and I go up and down these aisles. I go, none of the patients I work with can afford any of this stuff. So I have to keep that in mind, keep a clear perspective about what this is and what you're doing and who it's directed towards. So the audience is not my patients. It just isn't. So I was not to the manner born. I know full well how to be very economical. I can stretch a food dollar with the best of them, and I have had to do it. And I'm with you there. So at the same time, I like to, if I'm able to live in this specialty food market for a little while, it's a nice place to visit. And so I looked at that and I thought, okay, keep in mind, Keith, expensive, not always available. Might be once in a while food for people on a budget. At the same time, I would go to different booths and look, and they would start making health claims and talking to me about health claims, and I just kept my mouth shut. I did not want to get into a whole debate with them. But a lot of the claims I heard, at least from the people talking to me, the representatives, many of them were just flat out false. And I think you can't be making these kinds of claims. And it's like, I don't want to get into a whole, scene with you about this here, but some of it was just false. And for example, a lot of times they were also using what I would call descriptors as health claims. And you could say, oh, it's
for example,
it's like this is all non-GMO verified. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I happen to know the science about this. And when I hear that, I say, okay, so what? Because that's a method of growing a food, but not necessarily, but it doesn't impact the nutrition per se. It might, on the other hand, mean that it was grown with more pesticide. So, there are a lot of ways you can look at this stuff, but people often use this as, keep in mind, specialty food is also about this is a marketing show. So they're marketing. And a lot of them were saying, oh, it's 100% plant-based. I think, well, okay. I just gave a series of talks at professional meetings that were focused on, well, one of them was called the plant-based paradox. Can you be an omnivore with no dilemma? and, and I thought,
nice Michael Pollan reference there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I thought, well, okay, but because plant-based, unfortunately, I think, has become sort of hijacked by to mean vegan, and plant-based is just plant-based. It's also not a health claim. So when somebody says, "Oh, but this is all plant-based, so it's better for you," I thought, no, not necessarily. It depends on what the plants are and how they're used and how they're produced and all that. But it just means plant-based, plant-forward. Plant-forward would probably be more accurate, and it might mean that it doesn't have any animal foods or anything. That's fine. But plant-based is a descriptor. It is not a health claim. There's no formal definition of it, actually. So, whenever I saw a lot of those, so, and the idea that these were somehow better, they were being marketed as somehow better or more premium because they had these qualities. I'm thinking, no, these are just qualities, these are descriptors, nothing more, nothing less.
And also when it comes to chocolate, all chocolate that does not contain any dairy ingredient is plant-based. So all chocolate is plant-based. All chocolate is plant-based because it's based in cacao. Right. The question is, are there any animal-derived ingredients?
Right. Did you have? And so, when they say, and when people see that, oh, but it's got butter in it. Yeah, it's cocoa butter. It's not dairy butter.
Right.
So, sometimes I've had to do that. And they also, when I did see in the chocolate world once or twice, chocolate is loaded with antioxidants. I said, well, okay, but it depends on the kind of chocolate. If you Dutch the chocolate, those antioxidants, the polyphenols kind of go out the window to the 95% level or so. So, and then it really depends on how it's been kept and how it's been fermented, and handling is a lot. So that accounts for a lot of that. So.
But I think the challenge is, if I can, Keith, I think the challenge is that people are equating vegan and plant-based as being synonymous, and that's not is that necessarily true?
It's possibly true, not necessarily true. Okay. So it can be, vegan. All vegan is plant-based, but not all plant-based is vegan. Right. And plant-based, can you have that's one of my talks was about that. Can you have a plant-based omnivorous diet? Well, frankly, people are supposed to do that. I mean, it's kind of like, you should, but I mean, you even if you look at something as standard as the government's My Plate, there isn't a lot of animal food there. Okay. And we've all heard, make half your plate fruits and vegetables, a quarter or so or more, have it a grain. A quarter of that plate is animal foods. So, it really is, everybody's supposed to be eating a plant-based diet, not a plants-only diet necessarily. Plants-only is a choice.
Right. And I think another way to think about it is that, sugar candies are all plant-based as well.
Well, that's so. I mean, I could design a very terrible plants only diet, so not
we should do that. We should do that one day just for fun.
Well, and actually, the other thing that cropped up a lot is processed stuff. Although there was a lot of processed food there, but it's funny, if you process the food, but it seems to have a premium ingredient in there, that somehow is like, okay, it's like organic, okay, but it's still refined grain, okay. How far do you want to take this?
I could have organic white bread.
Well, or organic cookies.
Right. Well, yeah, made from a refined white flour, for example.
Yeah, and actually, somebody some time ago was interviewing me about organic tobacco cigarettes. And they said, well, is that somehow better? I said, no, cigarettes are bad. Okay. I don't care whether that's putting lipstick on a pig, and like make you feel better about it, but it's still, it's lousy. Don't smoke,
So as you're walking around, like one of the things that I noticed, I mean, I started attending the Fancy Food Show in the summer of 2001. And that was where my opportunity. I first met Gary Guittard that summer. And I also met Frederick Schilling, who's the founder of Dagoba Chocolate, that summer. And I've been to almost every fancy food show in New York City, except during COVID years between. And so what that does is, I'm very, very lucky to be able to have to have worked through a lot of flavor trends. So we see, for example, there was this period where everybody was trying to introduce their grandma's salsa recipe. And all of a sudden, boom, salsa is everywhere. And then 2 years later, it's none. And we see a lot of, green tea or tea in general, specialty salts, honey, right, was a big thing for many years. Did anything in particular stand out this year? And if you can remember back to 2022, have we seen any evolution in terms of flavor trends over the past couple of years?
One thing that does sort of there's a tea aisle. I guess there's always a tea aisle. One thing that I'm not sure it was a flavor trend per se, but it was really all about the key word here. Two keywords: women-owned businesses were big, and so they were really featured. Also, that word authentic was creeping up everywhere. And I kind of have my strategy this year that was go the first day, scope out the place for a few hours, come back the next day, and you'll be a little more focused, which I think was actually very helpful. And then I didn't have to, you didn't have to spend a lot of time finding out where everything was and getting the lay of the Javits Center and how they had formatted everything. But it was easier to do that.
So Keith, I have a similar approach, and I've never been able to implement it in with discipline entirely, right? But my goal on the first day is to make sure that I see every single aisle.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I will just run through, see every single aisle, and if something strikes me as being interesting, what I'll do is I'll put it in the show planner, right?
Yes.
And with the notation. And then what I can do is I can go back the next day, right? And say, okay, here is what I want to go see.
Yes.
Right. And then I can go and determine how many different things I saw that I thought were interesting. And I can sort of give myself a time budget for what it is I'm doing. And then it helps me organize, my 3D geometry of the location of everything.
Yeah, one thing that I like from a flavor standpoint, a particular flavor didn't stand out, but the idea that this is a flavor in a combination that you hadn't seen before was kind of a big thing. So even like the chips that would come up with different types of mushrooms. What I didn't see this time that I did see last time was freeze-dried mushroom snacks that were big the last time, and all kinds of like shiitakes and porcinis and whatever. I did see those, and they were attracting a lot of attention. I didn't see those kinds of things this year, and some of that might be a marketing issue because they're expensive. The idea of having a bag of 3/4 of an ounce of mushroom chips, for $8 is just not something that everybody's going to have. The other thing was so flavors. One thing that was interesting, and I had to go and try this one, was chocolate covered licorice. That was interesting. And I thought, well, okay. And it was by a Danish company, and the Danes are very, very big into licorice. That is their thing.
That's this company here, Lakridsbülo.
And they had those bowls in every flavor you could possibly have. And some of them were coated with white chocolate or dark chocolate or something. And I thought, okay, first of all, if you're going to get licorice, this was a totally different licorice than you might pick up in the supermarket. It really was. And they explained the process about how they cook it more slowly. They cook it for a longer period. And then they take it to the next level with coating it with dark chocolate, etc. They and I asked where they got their chocolate, and they didn't know offhand. They had to sort of get back to me, so they didn't kind of know. A lot of them were buying it from the big guys, the Calabos, et cetera, et cetera. And it was one of those big houses, but they didn't know which one. I did try it. It was a different experience than I expected, because I thought, okay, licorice, whoa, and then coated with chocolate. That was a combination I'd never had before. I actually didn't mind it. It was kind of interesting. And they had it in, chocolate, but also like coffee chocolate, coffee, they would infuse the coating, and some of the white chocolates were flavored with fruit flavors like passion fruit and whatever. So it was an interesting kind of a novelty. Not, they weren't selling anything, but they were certainly giving out samples left and right. And they showed up a lot of their products, et cetera. And their licorice, when I just tasted the licorice by itself, it was definitely better licorice than I think it's, if for somebody who doesn't like licorice, try this, you would try this licorice before you make your mind up. That's what I would recommend.
Right. So if we're used to sort of conventional, like black licorice or red, strips or something like this, the kind of licorice that this may be completely unfamiliar to us as licorice. Right.
Oh yeah, no, this was different. I mean, I had, I was one of those kids who loved red licorice, when I was a kid. Then I think they changed the formula and I didn't like it anymore. It started to taste kind of plasticky to me. The texture changed or something, but it was the supermarket stuff. And, we all grew up on that stuff. And this was definitely different. It was more intensely flavored licorice. So a little would go a long way.
Right, yeah, and it looks like what they're doing is they're actually playing. So I'm looking at this, green strawberry licorice, freshly picked green strawberries. I don't imagine eating green strawberries.
It was sort of the sour with the strawberry. I think that was, to me, that was not. I looked at that and I thought, you got to decide. Are you going to be strawberry or are you going to be sour? And I'm not sure they captured that super well. It did taste pretty good, but it's. It's
right.
You take
right, and I think if you go back to unusual flavor combinations, this is what you're talking about. But
yeah,
I'm looking at this, right?
Yeah.
So you've got crispy green strawberries in a chewy red licorice, right? Swirled with a silky white chocolate and a crunchy green sugar shell, right? And so what you've got is a really, really interesting combination of textures here, I think, which is
you have a lot going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in here.
All of those rounds or balls, whatever, because they're some form of chocolate, they have to put some kind of a glaze on there to make it easy to pick up, so that it doesn't sort of dissolve. It melts in your mouth, not in your hand. So, that still has to happen. So they put that glaze on there, and it does give a layer of sweetness. I tried the darkest one they had, the darkest chocolate, and I think it was a 65 or a 70%, which worked for me better than the super sweet stuff.
I understand completely. I'm looking at the crispy caramel, and I'm going crispy caramel licorice. And so what you're seeing is a speckled light brown shell. So I assume these are all covered with a candy shell, a sugar candy.
It's very thin though. It's very thin, and it cracks very easily.
Yeah, I can get that. So a dulce chocolate. So they're talking about a blonde chocolate with a raw licorice powder and a core of soft black licorice with sea salt. I mean, I can, this is a salted caramel, right, with a crunch to it and a chew to it. I can imagine it's really, really interesting. $24 for 10 ounces. You're right. It fits into the expensive side of things. But what I want to do is I want to start jumping through some of the other things that you saw there, if we can. Okay.
Sure.
And a quick reset, everybody. You're watching Pod Save Chocolate with my guest today, Keith Ayub. We're doing a tour, a review, a roundup of the Summer Fancy Food Show, which happened about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And Keith was there. I want to remind everybody that for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I put together a post on the Chocolate Life. Here is the post for today's episode. And I did not do this beforehand, but there's this area here, links and resources. I'm going to put a link to every website that we visit or every product that we talk about. So if you're interested after the fact, you see any of these things, you can go and you can contact the manufacturer or somebody else if you're interested in following up on any of the products that we talk about here. Also, Keith has a website, Cut to the Chase Nutrition, and I'll put a link to this website. So if you're listening to the podcast or you're watching it on your phone and things are really, really tiny, you don't necessarily have to figure out what the websites are and what the URLs are by reading the bar up here. And then I'm also going to link to the Specialty Food Association website. So if you are interested in attending the Fancy Food Show or exhibiting, there's a link to the Fancy Food Show. So having done that, Keith, I'm going to go in order, right, from your email. And so the first company that you mentioned was this company called Wright's Chocolate, right, which is an Ecuadorian company. What intrigued you about Wright's Chocolate? Was it the marketing? Was it the branding? Was it the flavors? Tell me about what stood out to you about Wright's Chocolate.
All over the food show was a lot of mention of authenticity, but also ethics and attention to climate change.
Ethics broadly defined as sustainability.
Really, I would say let's broadly define it, because some people focused on the sustainability. Some people, it was all about local or climate focused. Some of it was all of it, and they, fair price, fair trading, etc. This company was like Wright's Chocolate. I'm going to say right up front, what got me was that many of their workers, they particularly focus on workers with disabilities. And people who in this country would be described as people with special needs. And that tugged at me. So I'm going to be full disclosure there. I want this company to do well. I really hope it does, because they employ the kinds of people I've been seeing for many years who otherwise have a hard time getting employment of any kind in this country. I can't imagine how difficult it is in Ecuador, where services are even more limited. So this is very much like a bean to bar company, but they really do focus on having people with disabilities take part in their harvesting, their growing, their fermenting, all the aspects of the chocolate production process. So I did taste the chocolate, and I was pleasantly surprised. And I kept thinking, okay, is this going to be like really great cause, but it's not really good chocolate? No, it's actually really good chocolate. And so this is what it looks like. I tasted a few of the bars. I guess I can put it right up here.
So is that a flow wrap? Or
that's a foil wrap, yes. And it is how they come. They do that kind of, yes, exactly how it is. They've won awards. They are not, they're to be taken seriously. I think these are folks who are real players. They just came out with a bar labeled lime. So I haven't tried that one, but the one I did try, it's labeled lime, but it's actually got lemon flavor in there. So I'm not sure why they wouldn't have just called it lemon. But I actually wanted to try that kind of on with you guys here.
That's because there's confusion in Spanish in terms of the way limon gets
limon. Yeah, I guess maybe it gets
translated sometimes.
Oh, interesting. Now the foil wrap encompasses another foil. That's interesting. I haven't seen that before. And I asked if, and this happens to, it's all dark chocolate, so it's dairy-free and vegan. It's in these little partitions, which I think are kind of nice because they're easy to break off. I always like it when if it's something that's divided equally. And whoa. It's good. The lemon comes through. It's not overpowering. Very smooth. That's something that matters to me.
So is it citric without being sour? So it's got that fruit acidity without being overly sour, and like you'd find in a sour candy. But it's definitely definitely identifiable as a citrus fruit.
No, it definitely was, but it didn't have that peel, that bitterness of a peel that you find sometimes. But it's much smoother than I thought. And they do have, according to the they do have some sunflower lecithin in there. So it's going to be a 5 ingredient. It has cocoa butter, sugar, cocoa paste, natural lemon, and sunflower lecithin. I did like this though. And if you are not somebody who likes a lot of citrus inclusion, this one was pleasant. The chocolate dominates. And to me, that's what I like about it. It was sort of an essence of lemon without being sour. Good.
Gotcha.
Good bar.
So I do want to point out that, that at no point on the website do they actually claim on the website to be manufacturing their own chocolate from their own beans, right? So they do talk about Ecuadorian cocoa. So it's not entirely clear from the website that they are in fact what we would call a bean to bar chocolate maker. I just want to
and the link that I sent you worked.
Mm-hmm.
The one that was on the package did not, and I don't know what the story is.
I obviously found it. So
yeah, so I mean, I would say if you want to go, yeah, I mean, and it was the same thing. It's just it said it didn't work. It is all they use strictly Ecuadorian chocolate, and it is when I spoke with the person, I don't think it's on the it's I don't think it's on the package, but he did say it was a Riba Nacional. But they didn't. I didn't see that on the package, and I like the idea that this was the push in this company was to really emphasize employment of people who wouldn't otherwise have it, which I kind of liked. And it wasn't just children. They didn't want. It was not child labor and all that. They really focused on people with disabilities. I thought that I had not seen ever. Okay. So I kind of liked that idea, and I'm sure. They're not employing just people with disabilities. But the fact that they want to do that and, work with farmers and people who have special needs, I kind of say, look, nobody does that. And
but Keith, what I want to point out, and we've got quite a bit else to go cover, so I want to make sure we get to that, is that, no matter what the marketing story is, and part of the marketing story of Wright's Chocolate is this inclusive employment, or we'll just call it that, right? You need to have a sustainable business in order to be able to support the objectives of this inclusive employment. And so you need to make high quality products. Right. And so what we're talking about here is that there is no disconnect between the marketing of this inclusivity, right, the quality of the cocoa and the quality of the chocolate. And I think that's what's important to think about here.
And that's what crosses the finish line here, is that because they at the end of the day, you got to deliver the goods. Otherwise, what happens, I think, is that somebody will try it once, they won't try it again. And I would try this again.
That's always the point. You want, as a manufacturer or as somebody, you want to get to the third purchase. Somebody buys it once because they're curious. Somebody buys it a second time to make sure that they were remembering correctly, right? And if their memory is enhanced between these first two purchases, they're going to get to the third purchase and become a regular customer. Absolutely. I'm looking at this as an outsider, and I'm going, they make some claims about Ecuadorian cocoa being the best cocoa in the world, as put together by ICCO, and I would take that with a little grain of salt.
I will take every country says that they produce the best cocoa, so it's
and the best chocolate.
I just let that kind of go.
I'm just pointing out. These are claims to take with a grain of salt. So let's stay in Ecuador and go with probably the best known Ecuadorian chocolate company, which is Picari.
Picari was interesting, and I know this company. I mean, I've had some of their bars. They are well awarded. They have a good reputation. So I thought, if and they actually had samples available. So I didn't pay for the samples that I got. I got a few bars that they handled, so I did not pay for that, full disclosure. But this is what the bar was that I was given.
Can you read it?
Trufa Blanca, because I had said in this rather long conversation with the Picari rep that mushrooms are a little tricky to work with, truffles, etc. as well. And I remember in Barcelona, I had from a chocolatier. It was a ganache chocolate that was infused with mushrooms, and I thought, I thought, this is interesting. Oh my God, it was awful. And I tried it a second time. I thought, okay, maybe I just.
What I say, it's not to my taste, rather than.
Well, it was, and it might be, but I thought I really, and then some things. I don't know how somebody would like it, and I'm pretty broad. I mean, I'm pretty open-minded. But
have you tried this one yet?
I have not tried this one yet.
Try it now. Try it now.
So,
Try
yes.
it now, Keith.
So I'm thinking,
So I'm
okay.
I'm gonna solo on you, and so we're gonna
Okay.
get your just like close up, undivided attention on your face
Sounds good.
to see what your thought is.
Pulling it out of the box there, and this looks like it has a little bit. Actually, it doesn't look like it has too much bloom on it, so that's good. And it's divided into squares like this.
You don't need to go into that level of detail, right? You just like pop up a bit and put it into your mouth. And what are your impressions? So it's technically a dark chocolate.
It is a dark chocolate, yeah, and it has it's white truffle essence. So it's mild. I would say I liked it. It was good.
Okay. So they're adding a truffle oil into the chocolate. So I would expect it to be a little softer in terms of the temper and the bite, the chew, and the melt.
It doesn't snap as well the same way. But it's smooth. And they do put an emulsifier in there. The sunflower lecithin. By the way, everybody seems to be using sunflower lecithin now. That instead of like soy lecithin or whatever. If you're using lecithin, it seems to be sunflower. But I found it not offensive because I told them, I said, I'm not, and I found it like I'm kind of cautious about stuff like truffles and mushrooms because of that horrible experience. And he said, "You're going to like this."
What I want to do is I want to jump and say, here's a cheese that you tasted from Cypress Grove, their truffle tremor. So I'm going to assume that there was truffle essence in here as well, right?
There should be
notes. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it may not be in there. But would you think that this chocolate would go with that cheese? Just asking the question because it's a compliment. Okay.
Actually, it would, I think. And that truffle was not overwhelming, but that's a lot of people don't like goat cheese because they think it's too goaty, kind of like that kind of musky. This one is not, and I did like Cypress Grove, and they're famous for their Humboldt fog cheese. Which has sort of like the little ash layer in the middle of it. And they are Northern California folks. They also have their own animals nearby and all that. And they draw from strictly local sources there. This is a good cheese. I had not tried that before because they just started making it. So it's not made in very large quantities. And that's one of the things that I did notice, that some of these small scale producers are small enough that you're not going to see this anywhere.
You're certainly not going to find it everywhere. I mean, something like this limited edition Cypress Grove, you would find it in a specialty cheese shop, for example.
Absolutely, and you're going to have to look for a specialty food shop that carries it. So it's not going to be around.
Right. If anybody is interested in this cheese, I'm going to talk about another cheese, which is a fabulous dessert cheese that goes with a lot of chocolates and might actually go with the first one. Now that I think of it, this Meyer lemon and honey cheese is a phenomenal dessert cheese. I've had it; it's amazing.
Oh yeah, that I tried there too, and they did have that. Oh God, and that one would go well with. I think you wouldn't even need a chocolate bar with lemon essence. You could have a dark chocolate bar with this, just fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, they did have a recipe also for how to brulee one of their rounds. Yeah, it was really interesting.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, and it does require a kitchen blowtorch. You can do it in the oven, but you have to. They said put under the broiler, but you got to keep a watch on it.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it. And so, I'm just saying that if you do like cheese, here are two specific cheeses, right? One that or both of them Keith, only one of which I know, which represents really interesting pairing opportunities with chocolate. And for me, that's one of the really interesting things about the specialty food show is that, right across the aisle from a cheese stand will be a chocolate stand or something else. And you can go, oh, I want to try something. And if you have a tag on it that says press, as I do, people are usually pretty open to letting you go.
They were It's funny. It went two ways. They either wanted you to try everything they had, or you're press, you're not a distributor, we don't want to talk to you. So like, you've got nothing to do for us. So that's fine.
There is that opportunity.
And I did ask some of the other chocolatiers, where can people buy this? And they said they can't right now. That's one of the reasons we're here. So that's
I imagine that's an issue for some of the international companies. Yeah. Right. But for example, listen, I'm going to jump into another part of the presentation, which is these are, I went through the app and I searched for chocolate. Right. So I searched for chocolate and I learned, for example, there are 2,500 exhibitors, but there were only 112 which are dedicated to chocolate.
Right.
And so but a couple of those, I learned a whole lot of interesting stuff. So there were 2 craft chocolate makers that I found exhibiting on their own, actually 3. This Boho chocolate, which is in Massachusetts, I believe.
Yeah.
Bixby chocolate, which is in Maine.
Yes, I have one of their bars as well here too. I have the
Rocca from New York was there. Then we've got so all of these, even if they're not available at retail, you can go online and purchase.
Right, and if they're domestic, obviously you can. They're fair game. Yeah,
right.
And
absolutely.
There were chocolate sauces and things like that were also very big. Sauces, I would say, not necessarily salsa, but things to dip stuff into,
or pour over.
Or pour over, yeah.
Right.
And that. So and chocolate sauces, etc. One that I think I sent you was God, what was that that chocolate sauce? Oh God, God, did I send you it? Oh, Sunday Night Foods, and it was they produced 2 chocolates. That's the one. They had a lot of attention. They had 2 sauces. Their Founders Reserve was the kind of the premium one, and then their signature one. The signature one gets its
vegan.
Well, they're both vegan. Yeah, they do have others, but the signature sauce they buy from Calabo, and the Founders Reserve they get from Guittard.
The chocolate that they're using.
Right.
Right. So it's interesting. I think it's interesting here. I'm looking at it. I didn't look at it easier. They make small batch with Guittard chocolate, and then using Nielsen Massey as a vanilla source. So they are at least talking about some of their sourcing practices. You can see from these little bugs here that they are in fact award-winning chocolate.
No, they were getting a lot of attention. I have to say, they gave out a lot of samples, but I would say I didn't see anybody who didn't like it. They really it was very thick chocolate sauce, but it wasn't thick because they added glue to it. It wasn't like thickened with cornstarch or something like that. It was thickened because they used a lot of
the nature of the ingredients they're using, the recipe, as well as the way they're making it. Right. So I do want to go. Again, just you've got a lot of stuff that you wanted to go through, and I want to make sure we go through it really, really quickly. And again, so what was it? The next company you talk about is Spring and Mulberry. I'm sort of interested in why this company jumped out at you.
This one jumped out because I happen to like infusions of rose and herbs and flowers and things like that, the florals. And at the same time, it's difficult to do. And then the other reason is that, I tried their rose lavender, or their lavender rose, and I said, you've got a really delicate touch with this, and they don't infuse the chocolate with rose. They sort of layer the rose petals on top of the chocolate, so it's a little more subtle. Also, they don't use sugar. They don't use any sugar. And I thought, really? And they said they sweeten with dates. Now, fair enough. And they use a date paste. Mm-hmm. This, to me, becomes more of a philosophy. I mean, if they want to do that, that's fine. It does make the chocolate a little bit more gritty. It can't get super smooth because you're using date paste, and that's not as smooth as a syrup or a corn, or something that sugar is going to dissolve in. So it's like, is it more gritty? Yes. It can't be as smooth. Because if they're going to use date paste, that's kind of the way it is. And so they do sweeten it. And I'm guessing that they take the date paste and kind of mash it and kind of cook it down a little bit so it's even sweeter. But it tasted good if you don't mind the slight grittiness. They I think I asked to do no. They said they got it from a farmer, and they work with farmers. And I said, where from? The rep did not know it initially, but then she found out it was from Ghana.
Okay, because there are also huge date farms in California and in Arizona.
Oh, the dates
which produce paste.
The dates
it's all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely, from California. So that was, okay. Yeah, because they're in Southern California, so the Coachella Valley is just loaded with them. So, and I didn't even ask where they got the flowers from. So they have to be out of the flowers.
But what I do want to point out here, what's interesting, Keith, about the texture of this, is that perhaps one of the reasons why many of the bars are decorated the way they are is that there is a texture associated with the fennel. So here we have mulberry and fennel. Right. And here we have one that's got stuff on the back. And so there is a crunchy and textural element associated with what's on the back of the bar. And that's going to have the effect on the overall texture of the bar. And so the chocolate itself, which is just a mixture probably of a 100%, so an unsweetened chocolate, a liquor into which the date paste gets added, right, does have a particular texture associated with it because there's moisture in the date paste. That's
right.
Where it's coming from.
And it can be that they wanted to add those kinds of inclusions on top of the bar or on the back of the bar or whatever, because those are going to add their own texture, and it might mask that the chocolate itself is not as smooth. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, is that this could be a deliberate decision. Right.
Now, I can tell you, I've done a lot of chocolate confectionery sweetened with date syrup and date paste and date sugar. What I would do is I would use date sugar, and then refine it into the liquor, so I have a much smoother texture. But that's not their process. And
and I think they wanted to they wanted to actually use the paste so that they could really say they're not adding sugar, they're adding fruit. So that was part of it.
Right. And from a glycemic load perspective, it's superior to white sugar.
Yeah.
Right. And there is a nutritional component from it. I don't want to get lost in the weeds.
I don't know that you're going to, whenever I get that glycemic load question, I'm thinking, okay, how much of this are you really eating? We could get deep into the weeds of it.
Yeah. But what I want to do is so for people who are looking at perhaps exploring chocolates that use alternative sweeteners, certainly date paste is an alternative sweetener when thinking about chocolate.
Right? Well, and just realize the limitations. Yeah. Of
course. You're looking at alternative sweeteners. You want to stay away from sugar alcohols. You don't like monk fruit and you don't like stevia. This represents a place to go look, right?
And I would even, the business aspect of chocolate is certainly not my wheelhouse, but I would say, look, if you want to use this as part of your line, and make it an alternative so that you have this.
I'm talking about consumers. I'm looking to buy this rather than I'm a maker of it.
Okay.
Right. So I want to point out that. Yeah, no, certainly if you're a maker, you can go and explore with these things. But if I'm a consumer and I'm looking at different sweeteners, and you're right, so you've got this lavender rose. And so if you do like florals and you do have these interesting combinations of things, including mulberry and fennel. I love fennel. One of my favorite bars is going to be, the fennel and date paste filled bar from Mirzam, in the UAE. It's just a phenomenal.
I noticed they didn't, now that you bring it up, I noticed I didn't see, they may make a plain chocolate bar.
They do.
I didn't see that there. Okay.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, again, it's interesting, number one, because it's a different sweetener. And many people, when they talk about alternative sweeteners, are talking about erythritol. They're talking about one of the sugar alcohols. They may be talking about allulose. They may be talking about, and these things are very highly processed, very highly refined products.
Well, and also like
natural.
Like a lot of the rare sugars that are
right.
natural, but they're rare, so it takes a
Yeah.
lot to extract them. And but this is a company that is again women owned, but they're making that sugar-free or that no added sugar. They're using date paste as part of their identity. So it goes across all their bars.
Understand. So tell me what's interesting about Andre's Confiserie. So they say Confiserie Suisse. There's this idea that they're in fact a Swiss company. I don't know what their origin is, but what is it about what you saw at the fancy food show really intrigued you about what it is that Confiserie Andre's is doing?
Yeah, well, I kept thinking this was going to be an international guy, and it's not. His grandfather was international. He lives in Kansas City. He had absolutely no accent whatsoever. So he's born in the U.S. and he just he's the third generation. And he really, this guy does everything in his company. But he sort of kept it going and expanded it. They're out of Kansas City, so he does.
Hey, Mike King of Encore Coffee and Chocolate is out of Kansas City. Christopher Elbow is out of Kansas City.
So there's something going on there. Yeah, there's definitely something going on there, I thought it was kind of interesting because he does a lot of different things. He really, really covers the gamut. And one thing that I did notice that he had in his chocolate line was that nobody else did. I did not see it elsewhere. It was candied orange peel, which I think is I like. If it's done well, I really like it, but it's often done not so well. And one of the problems is that it tends, the orange peel tends to get too dry, too crystally, and it's sort of it's like eating gravel underneath the chocolate. And I tasted this one. I go, boy, this one was good. It was good, and it wasn't bitter. You got the orange essence, and the peel, but without that intense bitterness, and it was kind of moist. And it could be that this was the specialty food show and, the fancy food show. So this is going to be the freshest batch he's ever made. So, and it might be that it doesn't, turn out this way 6 months down the road. But I did like it. I happen to like candied orange peel because I grew up eating candied orange and grapefruit peel. My grandmother did it. And so I'm kind of tuned into what works and what doesn't with this stuff. His was, I'd say, one of the best I've ever tasted.
Right. That high praise. I mean, I'm a big fan of this done well. And one of my favorite experiences that I can remember ever in chocolate was at à l'Étoile d'Or, which is Denise Acabot's shop in Paris. There was a maker by the name of Christian Bouchard, and he made a whole candied clementine. So he candied the whole clementine, a seedless version, and then dipped it in dark chocolate. And it was just like, it was a little bit larger than a golf ball, and you bite into it. It was just insane. So I understand. When it's done well.
That's a tough job to do.
Yeah, no. It's just amazing. So I think the last one of your recommendations when it comes to chocolate related stuff was this olive oil cake.
That was flour and olive. And I have to say, there were things that drew me in. There were things that I did like. Taste wise, it was good. It's an olive oil cake. They did
a chocolate version. It's because
I did the chocolate version. Yes, I mean I tasted the vanilla one that she had also, and they were good. I like this woman. I had a very extended conversation with her over 2 different days. She's a nice person. I mean, I really have to say, I did actually. One day was at the conference or at the show, and I went to a pre-show event a couple of days before that was really focused on olive oil and all different types of olive oil, which is kind of another interest of mine. Because like chocolate, and cocoa, olive oils vary in their taste, in their terroir, everything. And her cake really was excellent. It was also expensive. I mean, it's basically a cake mix.
They are boxed mixes.
It's a box mix. So I mean, you have to kind of think of that. And they're not, they're not inexpensive. They were very good. But you're going to do the work. You add olive oil instead of butter. So there's no butter in there. And I can't remember if you add just milk, or if it's olive oil and milk and no eggs, or if there's an egg in there. But I have to look, but I think it was odd because it didn't include the usual ingredients that one would put into a cake. And yet it came out super tender, just melt in your mouth. So it was really good. She frosted them, or put like a glaze on. You don't need it. Yeah, you don't need it. I would make this cake like she has it right there, which is kind of unadorned. She is she's from Ghana. She is also located in the Northwest. Another one of those people who I actually really like her and would like her to do well. So I like to see that happen.
So I can say a little bit of summary is that, if you go look through the app and you start looking at who's at the show, right? And you go look at the exhibitors and things like that. And you look at chocolate specifically and things like that. That doesn't really give you a sense, because chocolate can be incorporated in so many things, right? So you do actually have to be very, very careful to walk through the show, right? Because if I look under the chocolate category, Flour and Olive is not one of the companies that are listed. So,
well, no, yeah, exactly.
So you do have, again, a tip when you're working at a show is that while you want to be very, very disciplined the first day of walking around and making sure you see everything, you need to give yourself enough time to go, oh, there is something that is adjacent to what it is that I'm looking for, and be aware of it. And so you may not be looking at cookies, and you may not be looking at jelly beans, because jelly beans are a big there's a lot of candy, right? High-end candy.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of candy
at the show. Yeah. And so, but right, what you have here is you have something which is a really quite, olive oil cakes. For anybody who's never had one, they're fabulous. I really love them, especially a lemon olive oil cake. That's my personal. Yes. Sicilian lemon olive oil cake. Absolutely.
Lemon and herbs. Yeah.
Right. And I'd put it up there next to, in terms of my favorite Italian desserts that aren't, pastries, a tiramisu. I would probably take, a good olive oil cake over a tiramisu any day personally.
Yes, I would. Hands down.
But they can be, if you've never made them before, a little bit daunting. And so one way to get into the olive oil cake world, and if you're interested in chocolate and doing something which is a unique dessert, then this represents an interesting entry into that world.
It was, Clay, you said it exactly right. And I actually asked Esther, the woman who runs this company, that, I said, well, if you have a really great quality olive oil, like an estate bottled olive oil or something I said, I don't know that I'd want to put it into a cake and have.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And she said, it'll work with other oils as well. But I mean, you don't have to use your best olive oil. But
no, but I could see sort of, using, a specific, single varietal Italian olive oil, which has got a very, very specific flavored note to it. And then I could go use a Spanish olive oil, which is different. I mean, the thing that occurs to me is I might take the exact same cake recipe and use 3 different olive oils and have 3 different, because when we think about single origin, we almost always only think about the single origin of the chocolate, the cocoa beans.
Right.
And one of the things is, like, if you were to do this chocolate cake, right, this chocolate olive oil cake with 3 different olive oils, now all of a sudden you're playing with a different aspect of single origin. And I think that exploration is really, really quite remarkable, and one that I encourage.
And, she was actually very, very open-minded. One of the things I loved about her was that she is from West Africa, but she said, but I love Mediterranean food. She says, why do I have to be, pigeonholed into cooking one type of food, and I think she says, I love Indian food. I love Southeast Asian food. She says, we all have to, because flavors are global, and we ought to be able to embrace that. And I thought that was the first time I'd kind of really had that in-depth discussion with somebody about that, who she was like, I love olive oil. She goes, but it's not native to me, but she, and I thought, that was a different perspective. We really kind of had a good discussion about that, and we both agreed. We're both on the same page.
One of my favorite aspects of going to something like the Fancy Food Show or the Salon du Chocolat, or whether it's in Paris or New York, is actually having those discussions around foods that are chocolate adjacent, and the inspirations. And that's what's really interesting, I think, for me about it. It's not just tasting the chocolate itself. but it is understanding food cultures that I'm, I've been to Nigeria once. I've only had the very narrow range of jollof rice. I'm familiar with, red palm oil and its importance in the cuisine. But, having somebody who comes from that background and talk about how their world view of foods has changed based on exposure to ingredients and
no, I think
that are not common in their where they come from. I think that crossover is really, really fascinating.
That exactly what was kind of interesting to me is that it wasn't just me kind of expanding my horizons, but people who I would expect to have those, sort of not really limitations, but they were also willing. The other people are willing to go and expand their horizons as well. And what you said about the Fancy Food Show app was important, because when I looked at that and where am I going to find chocolate, I realized that I'm going to be all over the map here with this. I'm going to be all over the exhibit. It's like,
literally and figuratively.
Right, yeah, and because it's like you might be finding you're looking for just chocolate, but it's going to take you all over
all over the world, literally.
Yeah, and so, all three floors.
But if I can, all three floors. Yeah, but what I can is that this is what I have the app loaded on my phone, and so what I can suggest is you don't actually need to have attended the Fancy Food Show to download the app. You can download an app. You can download the app. You search in the Apple App Store for Specialty Food Association, and you can download the app. I assume the same thing is in the Google Play Store or whatever your app store of choices is. You can sign up for an account and you can do all this searching, and you never know what it is that you're going to find. So, for example, I looked through this and I was doing random research.
You could do that.
Yeah. I was doing random research this morning. They're doing random research this morning. So I searched for chocolate. You can't see what it is that I'm doing here. And I searched on brands because I noticed that there were 321 results, 89 brands. And I'm searching through the brands and I found this company, Moonstruck. Many people know who Moonstruck is out of Portland, Oregon, right? But I learned as a result of looking at this that there's a company in Freeport, New York called ChocolateWorks. And ChocolateWorks now owns the Moonstruck brand. I knew that Moonstruck was for sale, right? And I did not know who purchased the Moonstruck brand. And it is this company called ChocolateWorks. And ChocolateWorks also owns, right, a brand. As a New Yorker, I'm sure you know, Keith, Fifth Avenue Chocolatier.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And actually, it was founded by this guy's father.
Oh, my God.
So this is a second or third generation candy. So they have Fifth Avenue Chocolatier. They own Moonstruck chocolates. They have the brand ChocolateWorks. There's also another brand called Fatty Sunday. And if I remember Fatty Sunday, it's a sort of New York small scale brand that grew out of the molecular gastronomy movement. There is some connection there, if I recall correctly. But until I had downloaded this and did some random search while I was waiting to talk to you, right? So, among other things, I said, I now know who the importer of Damori is in the United States, which I didn't know before. I thought I knew who that was. And so it's if you are at all interested in getting, a little deeper understanding of some of the players at retail. So if you are a small chocolatier or a chocolate maker who's looking to better understand specialty distribution, right? So the first thing I would do is, if you haven't ever been to a fancy food show in either New York or Las Vegas now, it used to be in San Francisco, plan to go and wander, because you want to see what the competition is and you want to see what they're doing and you want to see all their marketing and you want to see all the way that an organization like the Specialty Food Association might be able to support what you're doing. You will also find multi-line distributors, people who handle chocolate and other things, and they might be interested in handling you as well. And so you have an opportunity just for market intelligence, right? If you're not in distribution and you're thinking about getting into distribution, right, and you're making a high-end product, Specialty Food Show, Fancy Food Show is probably the best place to go. Your first stop is not exhibiting, right? Your first stop is market intelligence. Go visit. And the New York show has a different focus from the Las Vegas show. The West Coast shows tend to be more Asian focused. There's a lot more stuff from, that the other side of the Pacific Ocean as opposed to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. And so it's really, really important to understand those differences to go there. Say the last time it was summer of 2022. I'm sort of like, I need to go to one right soon. I was in Nigeria in January, so I didn't go to the Las Vegas show this year. But Keith.
One thing I would also suggest, if you're going to go, plan more than one day. I mean, you really got to go. And
go, as a matter of fact, if it's your first time, go all 3 days.
Oh yeah,
go all 3 days. And number one, spend the first day doing nothing but making sure you see everything.
Yeah, and one little anecdote. We were talking about date paste earlier, but I happen to love dates, and they are in their whole form a super nutritious food. But I found there was a whole section that was focused on dates from the Middle East, and I was trying varieties that I hadn't seen available here, and I thought, well, where can I buy these? They said right now only in Michigan. I said, why Michigan? That's where there is an incredible population of Middle Easterners. I said, well,
interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So a lot of things that you can find out that you didn't even know you didn't know. So it was a really interesting show to see, and I certainly highly recommend it for anybody.
Right. And apart from even if you're not interested in distribution, if what you're doing is you're interested in, so you can't take a 1 month tour of Southeast Asia. Right. What you can do is you can spend a day just focusing on the Southeast Asian pavilions and exhibitors at a place like the Fancy Food Show to find interesting ingredients and interesting flavor combinations, and perhaps places where you can go purchase these ingredients to put into your chocolate and confectionery products. I mean, for me, just being presented with the opportunity to go, I found something over here and now I want to run over here and put the two of them together to say, I have this intuition that these things are going to be phenomenal. And having the
opportunity. If you are looking for ingredients, you will find them.
Right.
Yeah. No,
there's another show called Supply Side. Which is a great place if you're interested in wholesale food ingredients. If you're interested in smaller quantities retail, it's a place to go find out, who is the local supplier of those things for me, right? So it's really, really important. Keith, last thing you want to say before we close out? We're running a little bit over time. I appreciate your patience today, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Always fun to be here. I am going to go to the Salon de Chocolat in New York City in November, so I'll be there too.
I hope to see you there.
This was, to me, almost an overwhelming, rich experience. So I wish next year, if I get to go next year, I'm going to go all 3 days. There were too many things that I missed that I wanted to cover. I would have enough to write about for 6 months on what I found there. So it was really interesting to talk to people as well, and the makers, and not just taste the food, but it was really interesting to talk about some of the talk to some of the craft makers and really find out what their passions are.
Right. Another thing that I know from my experience is if you end up going on a regular basis, right, you can start making personal connections with people. Right. And so I do have some personal connections with people at various stands, some of which have, extended into personal relationships.
Oh, that's good.
So for example, I met the international sales director for Guido Gobino at a fancy food show in New York City, but then had the opportunity when I was in Turin, right, to be able to get a personal tour of the Guido Gobino factory while I was there.
Oh my God.
And so you think, so there are lots of reasons to attend. I mean, if you're going to the Salon du Chocolat in New York, and you can do it on a regular basis. And as I did from 1996 to 2010 or 2011, I think I went to every show there was, right? You do have an opportunity, and it is the basis for creating the network that I was able to create. That longevity. I went and saw Gary Guittard, 2001, one of the first people that I learned. I told him what it was that I was trying to do. He was really skeptical of what it was that I was trying to do. But then I went back in 2002, and then I went back in 2003, then I went back in 2004, and he knew that I was serious about what it was that I was trying to do. And that's how I was able to establish that relationship is, and originally only through meeting him once a year at a trade show.
God, yeah.
I mean, so it's really, really important to understand the nature of network building if you're a professional, right? And understand, and if you're a consumer, what you want is you want the people that you're buying your chocolate from, you're buying your confection from, to have this same sort of curiosity about what's going on, because they're going to bring it and they're going to create more interesting, more flavorful, more quote unquote ethical, more quote unquote sustainable, more quote unquote, better for you chocolates as a result. And again, you can, you won't have an opportunity to taste, and it's really maddening in many, many respects. But if you do download the app and you start doing some searches, you can get some really, really interesting understanding.
And that's another reason to go like 3 days in a row, because I'll tell you, if you're going to be tasting stuff, you really have to be selective. Otherwise, you're going to get overload in the first hour. I mean, you'll just get it's sensory overload. Right. So yeah, be a little selective there. But I like going if it's a show that's also open to the public. I like going, if possible, on the press day or the B2B day or whatever, because you can talk to people a little bit more.
Well, that doesn't exist at the show.
Not at this show. No, not at this show. But like at the crafts, especially the one I went to in San Francisco, the craft chocolate experience, that existed there. And there were positives and negatives, because some of them had set up their booths and just went home. They didn't want to talk to anybody. But that was a disadvantage.
So, absolutely. I'm lucky enough to have worked with a couple of companies that have exhibited at the Fancy Food Show. And so I can borrow an exhibitor badge.
Yeah. That's very nice.
Walk the show floor on setup day.
Yeah.
And by walking the show floor on the setup day, what I'm able to do is I'm able to orient myself. I may not talk to anybody except to say hello. Ooh, interesting. If they look like they're willing to talk, but it gives me an opportunity to get the orientation that I need, so that I can begin to focus, when people are there, right? I know, do I want to start in the upper left-hand corner or the lower right-hand corner? Downstairs on high aisles or upstairs in the low aisle? At least I have some sense of, where I can begin. So these are the sorts of things that over the course of, I've been attending. My first trade show was in Q4 of 1983. And I've been going to trade shows ever since, at least one a year, and sometimes as many as 8 to 10 a year. Right. I'm not proud of that fact, but but what it does is it's provided me a little bit of insight in how to take advantage of the resources that shows like the Fancy Food Show offer. And that's where I want to end it today. I want to say thank you very much, Keith, for joining me today. What I want to remind everybody, that this episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, is supported by members of the Chocolate Life. This is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there. There's a little green button up here, or a little avatar icon down there. I'm logged in, right? If you're not logged in, it says join. So click on that, join. There's always a free membership tier. There is some members only content, newsletters and things like that members can see. If you're interested in professional services, there are premium tiers in which consulting and coaching comes as a part of all of those things. So I want to say that if you've been watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, follow the Facebook, like and follow what's going on, and
subscribe.
Give a subscribe. Yeah, go to the YouTube channel on Pod Safe Chocolate channel on YouTube. All of those kinds of things to help grow. And again, for every episode of Pod Safe Chocolate, I create a post. Now, I haven't added any of the links that Keith and I discussed. I'm going to go back after the show, so sometime in the next hour or three. All of the websites that we discussed, links to the homepages, are going to be discussed. I'm also going to be providing a link if you're interested in getting your own copy of Omnivore's Dilemma. You should have it. I mean, if you're interested in food, you should have it. And also, Michael's got another book called Food Rules, right? And I'm going to put a link to the Food Rules book here. Keith, are you familiar with Food Rules?
I have not read that one.
So, Mike, one of the things that Michael said is like, okay, here's a food rule. Is like, if your grandmother, if you can't explain it to your grandmother, don't eat it, don't buy it. And
except that when we get into things like, if you can't pronounce it, don't buy it, or if it's too long, that's get rid of that.
No. I think he's much more sensitive of that. I mean, I have my own kind of rule that he asks people to send him in rules that I like. And my rule is made with real. If you see anything marketed with made with real, think twice about made with real fruit. Okay, well, it's made with 1/10 of 1% real fruit, right?
Well, I always have to laugh at when you see a label that says free from this, free from that, free from the, and it's like, okay, well, what does it have? Okay, I know it doesn't have all this stuff, but like, I think it's unfair to consumers to be that fear mongering. You know, it doesn't help consumers. They just make
free from, right? And it's like you know, plant-based chocolate. Well, you know, chocolate comes from cacao, and cacao is a plant. So all chocolate, unless it's factory-made cacao, so cell-cultured cacao, right, is plant-based, right?
Yeah.
And so why call attention to something which is a natural aspect of the product, right?
You know, one of my favorites is that I saw a label on non-GMO verified bottle of water. I think, okay, now to my knowledge, there's no DNA in
where
water.
is GM water ever? Right.
It's like, okay, biggest waste of money to get that verified. But it's clearly, sometimes it's just a marketing thing. That's it. Right. Not a quality thing.
Okay.
Anyway.
And with that, Keith, again, I want to say thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to put a link to your website so everybody can go read the article about fruits, summer fruits that you just posted, and other
and an interesting story there too. Yeah. Right. I put an anecdote too. Right. So good.
And, you know, just for anybody who is watching this after the fact, is that Keith has also been a contributor to all of the articles on the Chocolate Life, which have been focusing on cadmium and heavy metal contamination. And so you can go to the Team TCL link, you can click on Keith, and you can find all the articles for which Keith is a co-author on the Chocolate Life, if you're interested in the topic of cadmium contamination in chocolate and things like that. And with that, I want to remind everybody, as I sign off, as I always do, is if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Until the next time, everybody, ciao.